I'm a control freak, you're probably a control freak. In fact, most business owners are control freaks. And that's not meant as a negative thing. It's just how we are, and it's how we start and run our business in the early days. The problem is, control freaks get so caught up in the details that often they struggle to grow their businesses past what they can achieve working like 60, 70, 80 hours a week. My special guest today has built a successful MSP and an even more successful side business. And he did it by not being a control freak. You're going to love listening to what he's done and how it could help you to improve your business.
G'day, I'm Peter Bell. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Techno Global Team out of the Philippines, and also Techno Group, MSP, 32 years here in Melbourne, Australia.
So it is an absolute delight to have you on the show, not least of all because as we're speaking now, you went to bed and then got up at 1 a.m. to do this interview, you being in Melbourne in Australia and me being in the UK. So thank you for that, Peter. I do appreciate that commitment to this podcast. Now, I wanted to get you on because you've been running your own MSP for, I think you said 2-3 decades, and you've recently moved over into something different. I want to talk about what made you get out of running your MSP and then this new cool thing that you're sort of dedicating yourself to. So tell us a little bit. Let's go back to when you started your MSP. What got you started in the first place? And tell us the story of how you grew that business.
Yeah, well, I was 17 at the time and I was at university and I got kicked out of university because I didn't agree with the syllabus. And living at home with mum and dad, I was given two choices: go and get a job or study a new course. And I remember as a cocky little 17-year-old saying to my mum and dad, I'm going to go with option C. And they go, there is no option C. I said, yes, there is. I'll start my own business. So I went to register a business, an IT business. And in Australia, you have to be 18. So I grabbed my brother at the time, who was older, and he came down and helped me register a business. We registered together. He was an accountant or studying accountancy. And the MSP was born. I've never worked for anyone but myself since the age of 17. And so that's how the MSP was born 32 years ago.
Yeah, and now, of course, you're completely unemployable because once you've done about 5 years working for yourself, you can never, ever have a job. And certainly after 32 years.
I wouldn't hire me, I'll tell you that. So basically we had the MSP for 32 years. And nearly 15 years ago, we were struggling to find staff in Australia. A friend of mine's a humanitarian lawyer and she works in the Philippines with street kids and invited us over there for a weekend. We were in Hong Kong at the time doing some business and we opened up an office. And next thing we know, that business has grown from where it started 14 years ago with 2 people. We're over 1,000 people there now in the Philippines. And this year, the business has got so large and so busy, we had to make the decision. So I decided to leave the MSP this year after 32 years and dedicate all my time and energy now on our business, Techno Global Team in the Philippines. 32 years compacted very shortly.
Yeah. No, that's a really good summary. Thank you. Because I want to talk about entrepreneurship and making big, difficult decisions. That's what interests me with this. Before we do that, can you just explain what that business is in the Philippines? So just briefly what it does and how you've got to 1,000 people there.
Absolutely. So we started with 2 technicians that were doing back of house for our MSP, server patching, rebooting at night, things that I couldn't pay overtime for staff in Australia to do. And then one of our direct competitors, another MSP here in Melbourne, said, can you hire some staff for me? And we said no. We said, you're our competitor. Why would we do that? And then they said, well, if you don't, we'll hire them with somebody else and we'll still be competitors. So we thought, great, there's an opportunity here to make our competitors our customers. So we hired 2 technicians for them and so on and so on. So we now help about 300 MSPs around the world. So hire not only technicians, but sales administrators, marketing, bookkeepers. We realised that inside an MSP, having one for 32 years, there's lots of different positions. And sometimes you can't find staff. Sometimes you can't find the right staff, the right skill sets, the right price. There's varying reasons why you need additional help. And that's how TGT was born, just basically by helping MSPs around the world fulfill positions they can't do locally for different reasons. It's not always just about money. So that's essentially what we do. We help MSPs grow.
And you've clearly locked into something if it's grown that much in just over a decade. So we'll come back and talk about that business. Yeah, towards the end, we'll come back and talk about that. Let's just talk about you stepping away from the MSP. So you haven't sold the MSP, you've kept that, but you've handed over the reins to someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're very lucky in that our MSP in Australia is 14 people in the MSP in Australia, but there's 22 people in Manila that work in that MSP here in Australia. So just under 40 people all up in the MSP. We're lucky in that the average tenure of staff here in Australia in MSP is 17 years. So the staff that are with us have been with us for a very, very long time. And so naturally, we're able to hand over a lot of the control to those senior staff members to run the MSP for us. Darren and my brother are still actively involved in that. And so just handing the reins over, obviously I'm living here in Melbourne, so I'm still popping into the office and seeing some of the clients from time to time. But the day-to-day running of the MSP is now handed over. I sit on a board meeting, and so I go in and sit on the board meeting and give advice and direction. But the day-to-day running of the business, I'm not involved in at the moment.
Okay, and what made you? If you're not involved in it day to day, I'm curious, and I'm looking again at this from an entrepreneur's point of view, where you're in a lovely position. You've got 2 successful businesses, yep. And even though you're not running one day to day, I guess you're still involved in that business. So, what was the trigger that made you think, do you know what, I'm going to walk away from that and focus all my time on this other business?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take it back a different step. The reason why we have the TGT business that's grown so well is the mistakes that we made out of the MSP. Darren and I, my brother and I, one of us would always be in the business. We'd always be there because we thought one of us had to, as an owner, always be inside the business. Then one day, our mother come to us and said, right, we're having a family holiday. You both have to come. And we said, okay, which son are you going to choose on the holiday? And she goes, no, you're both coming. And if there's one thing you know, you never argue with your mum. So we both went away. And that was the beginning of the change for the way that we operate. And it was our realization that you didn't always have to be there. If you put the right structure, people, process in place, you can step back. And that's what allowed us to grow TGT so rapidly and so quick. All the mistakes we made in MSP by thinking we had to control everything went away, and we put a really good team over there in. Allowed us to concentrate on our MSP there for a while, but obviously the larger business it's now 5 times the size of our MSP, and so as a result of that, it needed to have someone there running it full time. Albeit, I live in Melbourne, the business is Melbourne, sorry, the business is in Manila, and predominantly our customers are in North America. So it's a very strange sort of business setup. Living in one country, the business is in another, but all your customers are in a third country. And as a result of things like this, with time zone differences, couldn't keep working 9 hours a day in Australia and then working at night in other time zones. So it led to making the choice that I had to choose one.
Yeah. And obviously you chose the one which is seeing the most rapid growth and I guess which has got the most potential in it as well. I mean, what you've just described there sounds very much like a business of the future, doesn't it? Like a 2025 business where you're running it from country A, the majority of the staff are in country B, the majority of the customers are in country C. It's the kind of thing that I guess we couldn't have done 10 years ago, but now is a relatively easy thing to do. So when you talk to MSPs and you say to them, we'll just outsource some of this to us. You know, we know what we're doing. We've been doing it for some time. We've got 1,000 people already. What are the fears that they have? And I ask that because you and your brother obviously went through that process where one of you felt you had to be present, but then you got over those fears. And I would imagine, well, let me turn this into a question. Do the vast majority of MSP owners still have those fears that I've got to be there? There's got to be someone overseeing this. I've got to be across everything. Yeah,
I think if you put it just in one word, control, we see a very distinct difference with the customers that we have and the growth that they're on as MSPs if they are technician owned and led versus somebody who is a business acumen led or a technician-based MSP who's brought in business management to help them run the business. And the biggest difference here is just control, where technicians like to control the environment and they like to control the outcome. You've got to give up some of that control to be able to grow and to be able to do the things that you want to do as you go along. So I'd say that's the biggest one that we see is MSPs need to, or all business owners need to give up a level of control to be able to grow the business. You can't do everything yourself. You're not the best of everything. Steve Jobs said, hire smarter people and get out the way. Absolutely concur. You hire people for a reason. You've got to let them get on and get that job done. But as an owner and as a small business owner, it is the hardest thing to give up, which is control. The sooner you do that, and growth, not every business has to grow. Not every business has to be very large. It's whatever's right for you at that point in time. So you have to be ready for it also. I always say you've just got to be ready when opportunity knocks. And that's what we think we give a lot of the businesses, the opportunity to do what they want, whether that's to re-educate their team with the capacity or to grow their business. You've just got to be ready when opportunity knocks. And I think that's the biggest difference between an owner and an entrepreneur, is the ability to see that opportunity and take advantage of it when it comes.
Yeah, but I believe anybody can go from owner to entrepreneur. It's not something you're born into. I believe it's a mindset that you acquire, and hearing you talk about being ready for the opportunity is exactly that. Do you believe that the MSPs that start to think of, right, I'm going to hand over control, I'm going to create some space for us to do something new, do you think that's an important action that you have to take in order to get the right mindset?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. So we've had 3 occasions in our MSP that got us to where we are today, where customers have gone bankrupt. So very large customers have gone bankrupt and forced us to make changes in the business. There was 2 directions you could go. You could fold and you could be upset and you could be worried, or you could take that as a learning curve and then move on, and it developed you for the next stage of where you wanted to be. So I think they are afraid to give up the control, but if you have the right people around you, and it starts with exactly that, having the right people and understanding the skill sets. You know, the old saying, you've got the right people on the bus, you just got to put them in the right seats. And if you have that, you can then grow the business. We had a technician who became a service delivery manager at our MSP and did a terrible job. And we knew he was the right person for the company. We'd put him in the wrong position. I was going on holidays. I was the only salesperson in the MSP. And then we put him, he said, I'll do sales while you're away. That was 15 years ago. Still leads our sales team today after 15 years. Right person in the company, wrong seat on the bus. And when you do find that, then things start to lighten the load. And then as an owner, I could go off and do other things because I knew that things were being taken care of. I probably shouldn't say this, but I have a thing called F-off moments, where when I go to a staff member and I go to tell them how they need to do it, and they just come straight back and tell me how it needs to be done, and I just go, right, that's an F-off moment. I know now that they've got it. I can leave it and I can move away. I'm comfortable and confident that they've got control of that situation or that question. As an owner, and I say to them, they look very strange at me, it's the best part of being an owner when somebody does that, because you know they've got it. You know you can move on. That's how you get your growth.
It is. That makes perfect sense. Final question for you, Peter. If you imagine an MSP listening to this or watching this on YouTube, and they're nodding along enthusiastically, but they're at the very start of that transformation. So they're still instrumental to the business, doing, they're the principal, they're doing all the sales, they're doing all the third line, maybe even much of the second line. They're still, I use a phrase of being trapped in the business, whereas a business owner, you create a prison of your own design, you trap yourself inside. So you and I know that the first thing is to want to free yourself from that prison. But you've obviously done this. In fact, you've probably done this a couple of times now in 2 businesses. What's the first step?
The first step is the first step. And what I mean by that is, if you imagine the first person that ever bungee jumped, the heart told them, or don't do it, and the head said, go ahead. Science tells you you'll be safe. And you've actually just got to take that first step. You've got to, when people come to us and say, I'm trapped, I'm not sure what to do. I had a gentleman, I was at a conference last year, and a stranger come up and just gave me a hug. And I said, hello, how are you? He goes, yeah, good. Yes, you've changed my life. And I go, that's great. Who are you? And he goes, I'm one of your customers. And I go, great. And he explained to me he was a single operator. So he was a one-person show. And he said, I did something last week that I have never done since I started my business. And I went, okay, what's that? He goes, I took my daughter to school.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, as a single operator, I've got to be there first thing in the morning because the phone rings. He goes, so I can never take my daughter to school. He goes, but now that I've got somebody working with me, I know they're there at 9 o'clock. They answered the phone and I got to take my daughter to school. And so it's taking that first step and just going, you know what? Work out what that first step is going to cost you, whether that's training, whether that's education, whether that's hiring somebody offshore to help you. Work out what that costs and go, right, if I was to lose $10,000, $20,000, would that end my world? if the answer is yes, well, then don't do it. But then question yourself, should you be a business owner? Where's your business going to go if you're not going to be willing to risk that amount of money? If you're willing to risk it, have a go. It works, and then you can take on the next step, or it doesn't work and you learn a very good, valuable lesson, and you can pivot your business to where you need to go. So the first step is the first step, and you've just got to take it. But educated or calculated risk is what I would say.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Peter. It's time for you to go back to bed. But before you do, just tell us a very brief recap of what can you do to help MSPs, and what's the best way to get in touch? I guess it wouldn't be with you directly, but to get in touch and explore, hey, what can you guys do to help us? Yeah,
look, what I would say is just jump on technoglobalteam.com. We've got a calculator on there which allows you to work out what is the cost of hiring somebody overseas. Don't be afraid of having staff member overseas. As we said at the start of this article, the globalness of our industry. The biggest risk to an MSP is probably not the MSP next door to them anymore. It's an MSP in a lower cost center somewhere around the world that can offer the skill sets, the time, or the cost to compete with you. So it's a globalisation now with MSPs, as I said, competing with somebody potentially in another country, not just in another city in your country. Reach out to us, have a look at how we can help you from a skill set perspective. The biggest thing I learned out of this, I think, over the last 15 years is the longevity of my MSP staff onshore is 17 years. Because 14 years ago, I went overseas, I put staff on, and I took all those tasks that they don't want to do, that adds no value to them or the company, but it has to get done. And we've all got those tasks. That's your pot of gold. That's your opportunity. So reach out and talk to us.
Paul Green's MSP Marketing Edge.